Today is the first webinar of Prelia, and today we discuss about a very, very important argument, which is the Myanmar crisis. And the Myanmar 6 months after the coup, and we are going to analyze the role of ethnic minorities and regional foreign actors. Almost half a year after the military coup of February 1, Myanmar is still immersed in chaos, as the military junta seized more power at home and suppresses any opposition to its rule. The democratically elected government of the November 2020 elections remain imprisoned and on an unfair trial. So far, the conflict has claimed the lives of at least 912 people. There are currently 6,770 arrested and 5,277 people who are currently detained or sentenced. The webinar of Prelia will discuss and analyze the current situation from different perspectives, both from inside and outside the country. Guests will explain the current role of ethnic minorities, the people-led civil disobedience movement, ASEAN, and finally, China. They will also analyze possible trends given the latest events. So today I will not manage this very, very good webinar, but this webinar will be led and managed by Marta Nuevo Falguera, which is a Spanish Asia Pacific analyst based in the Netherlands. She holds an MA in International Relations and a diploma in International Conflict Management by Utrecht University in the Netherlands. Marta works here at Prelia as a Southeast Asia analyst, and she writes articles on Asian politics at El Orden Mundial. So, to make a long story short, I am leaving the floor to Marta Nuevo Falguera, which she will manage this webinar, and she will do it, obviously, in the best way as possible. So, Marta, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Mirko. So, as Mirko said, we're going to discuss the Myanmar coup after almost 6 months. How the situation is both in Myanmar and also how it is seen by regional actors such as ASEAN and China. Joining me, we have Ted, who is a Burmese activist based in Myanmar, and she works as an organizer for the People's Movement Against the Junta. And talking about ASEAN, we have Medina Putri, who is an Indonesian Southeast Asia political analyst based in London. She's finishing a BA in Philosophy, Politics and Economics at King's College, London. And she also works at Prelia alongside me, as well as in other companies such as Fresh Minds. So to start, first things first, I'd like to give the floor to Ted, so you can tell us what's the situation from Myanmar, how what the people are doing 6 months after the coup.
So Minglaba, as Marta has introduced me, my name is Ted. I'm currently based in Myanmar at the moment. I apologize for having to cover my face. It is still quite dangerous for the people in Myanmar to speak out and speak up about what is happening here. The military continues to operate as if it is a surveillance state. So the risks and the dangers are still quite high for us now, as they were when February 1st came along. If I have to summarize now, we are nearing the point of complete decimation for my country. We are having many overlapping crises, humanitarian crises as well, due to the conditions and circumstances that the military has caused in trying to seize power here. As Mirko touched on earlier, we can verify the deaths of 900, but many, many thousands more have died, and we are unable to add them to those statistics because the 900 that Mirko mentioned, these are the 900 who were killed and shot or tortured by the military. Many more have died due to disease and famine, food insecurity, as well as now we are in the midst of the third wave of the COVID pandemic here. Even today, 1,200 people have died in the city that I am in now, including people that I know. And the Delta variant is very much raging across the country. And in my view, the military is not only incompetent in being able to handle the crisis, it is actively undermining our ability to survive in the ways that they have seized oxygen production plants, have stopped humanitarian organizations from donating supplies to very vulnerable communities. So we are in grave danger here in Myanmar still. Despite all of the risks, people are still protesting. They are still resisting the military in different ways through the civil disobedience movement, through the refusal of working for the military, in order to starve them of the legitimacy that they want. The military wants to see itself as the leaders of our country, as the sole keepers of the people. For us, that is not the case, and we will do anything that we can to show them that they cannot rule us. They cannot rule force. They cannot take what is not theirs. And so, despite all the death and tragedy that we have experienced for 6 months, we are still pressing forward as best as we can. So that would be a good summation, perhaps, of our situation 6 months into it. So I will stop there.
Thank you very much, Ted. Now, for Medina, what is the situation outside of Myanmar? How is Indonesia, but most importantly, how is ASEAN looking at it? Which is the main, for most, is the association or the actor, the international actor that could do the most help to the country.
So thank you again, Marta, for having me in this webinar. In terms of ASEAN, I think the last time they had a fruitful outcome was the 5-point consensus from the April summit. But unfortunately, there's not much progression from that. And what's actually happening recently was following the June 18 resolution, which was the condemnation of the coup in February, it kind of like resulted in a split between the ASEAN member states. So member states like Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Indonesia, and Vietnam supported this resolution, which includes an arms embargo as well. Whereas the remaining member states who abstained, including Cambodia, Laos, and Brunei, and Thailand, decided to abstain. So it's kind of like a split between the ASEAN member states. And for the member states, as I mentioned, like Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Vietnam, they're basically led by Indonesia. And the dilemma here is the right of non-interference. Because part of the principles between ASEAN member states is the compliance to the democratic principles and the rule of law, but this also includes the non-interference rights in regards to domestic or internal affairs. So there's a conflict there, because, for example, should any member states or a bloc decide to interfere, then it also puts the harmony, peace, and cooperation between ASEAN countries at significant risks as well. At least that's the current climate in the ASEAN community.
Thanks again, Medina. And for my part, I'm going to talk about China. As some of you may know, China has been for decades Myanmar's main trade partner, even during the years of military junta control before the democratic transition. Myanmar was surviving, or the junta was surviving, thanks to China's commerce with China. The Western countries, such as the US, European countries, Australia, they would impose sanctions on them because it was not a democratic country. But yeah, it was mainly because of China that Myanmar was surviving during those decades. However, China, even though China is could be seen as the junta's main ally, China is not, let's say, keen on a return of Myanmar's the junta in Myanmar because of its volatility and instability. For years, even though they were able to do projects together, they were also running mega projects in the BRI, in China's Belt and Road initiative. The military was time and time again seen as a sort of volatile and not sort of risky companion, trade companion. So the military was really, I mean, also the thing is, China is not keen on the military's return, let's say, but China's priority is mainly stability in the country and stability in its businesses that it has, mainly the ones having to do with the BRI and the China-Myanmar economic corridor that links China to the Indian Ocean through the Myanmar's port of Sittwe. The thing is, now that the military is back, at first China was not saying much, was not sanctioning it like Western countries. But now, in the past weeks, it has sort of we have seen a sort of change in China's point of view, as in we've seen that there's been a recent meeting between Min Aung Hlaing, the military junta's top general, and China's ambassador in Myanmar, to make a return, to restart the projects. And also after the meeting, the China ambassador in Myanmar referred to Min Aung Hlaing as a leader. So even though China is not very keen on the military coming back to power because of its volatility in comparison to the NLD government back when Aung San Suu Kyi was in power, it sees the situation as let's see which the military is now in power, so let's talk with the military because it's what is going to bring stability to our projects. That's basically it. So now that we've all shared our point of view on the issue, I would like to ask some questions to the others, to the other panelists. So for you, Ted, as the conflict intensifies, how is the role of minorities evolving? How are they evolving in relation to the conflict? What actions have they taken?
I myself am part of the ethnic group in Myanmar, although I do not want to speak on everyone's experience because there are so many different ethnic groups in Myanmar. Even the majority Bama, who is an ethnic group in and of itself. I think right now with the public, because of the coup, a lot of the social issues that plague Myanmar have come to the forefront now. When we talk about racism, when we talk about discrimination against ethnic minorities, sexuality, gender, all of these issues have come to the forefront. And that's also part of the Spring Revolution, is not only the idea of dismantling the military junta. It's not about a return to what was before, but really trying to build a new federal democracy, a new nation where everyone can be included. And part of that is also to do with the issues that have plagued ethnic groups for quite some time now. Like the military has been here among us. The Tamada as an institution has been a part of Myanmar for many decades. And the atrocities that they have committed are not only isolated with the Rohingya crisis in 2017 or the coup at the current moment. The military has persecuted, has abused and exploited ethnic groups for quite some time throughout history now, including my own. And that is why we have what is known as ethnic armed organizations here in Myanmar now. So these are armed groups, usually divided by ethnic group, who are also fighting for their own people, fighting for their sense of safety and their ancestral homes. So now, because of the coup, there has been a shift in mainstream Myanmar population where we are recognizing, you have been screaming about your issues. You've been screaming about these problems of what the military has done. We did not listen to you. We are so sorry. We apologize for not standing with you then. We will stand with you now. And so there is that sense of national reconciliation has begun. And in due part because some of the EAOs, not all, and there's also some connections in terms of how the EAOs have operated within the geopolitics in Southeast Asia. And from a general standpoint, a lot of the EAOs have opened up their territories for any civilian who needs to escape arrest from the military. They say, come here, we will protect you, we will take care of you. You are a person of Myanmar and we will shield you and shelter you. So many civilians have escaped the urban areas and gone to the ethnic territories. And then in addition, our movement started as a nonviolent movement. We protested in the streets. We are not armed. Civilians cannot arm themselves here in Myanmar. And so, at first we went from the standpoint of please hear us, perhaps with mass demonstrations. The international world can then support us because they are seeing how dearly we want freedom, how dearly we want democracy. But when the military started to violently crack down, children were being killed, elders were being killed. On a daily basis at night, people would be kidnapped. Friends of mine have been in jail now, detained for months now, and been tortured. From that, the military really sowed the seeds of hatred within my generation as well as in the movement, in the sense of this is a grave injustice against the civilians. We must arm ourselves in order to defend ourselves from their actions as well. So we have also what is known as civilian armed groups as well. And these are mostly comprising of youth, Generation Z, people who are 18, 19, 20. Many of them have decided, I will train myself so I can protect my family, protect my loved ones, and protect the city from the military persecution. So many of them themselves have gone to these ethnic territories as well, where the EAOs are saying, we are willing to train you, we are willing to help you. Should you need our help, should you need our allyship, we will be there for you. And so these are kind of the actions that many ethnic groups have taken. Again, it's a sense of we may not always want the same thing, but we have a common enemy now. But there is still a lot of work to be done. Trying to undo decades worth of racism and discrimination is quite difficult, especially when it is embedded in our society and culture for so long. So there's still, schisms, there's still divisions within, what is best for the country, what does a real federal democracy look like? Is that what everyone wants? But there is also that overarching sense of people are willing to try, people are willing to listen, to learn now, in a way that they were not willing to learn before, because our education system was very much favored the majority group versus the minority groups. And so I think there is a real opportunity there for that national reconciliation. That is the important point for me as well. And this is also part of what we are fighting for. So I would say that is a lot of what the role of ethnic groups is taking right now. They are not only just co-conspirators, they are leaders within this movement. Without them, without us, I feel that our movement would be much more divided.
Thank you very much, Ted. And as you said, there are many ethnic minorities in Myanmar. But the thing is, given this, after the democratic stint of the last decade, there is a more connective sense of connection between all of Myanmar's populations. So back, a question for you now, Medina. You said that the Myanmar's conflict has the chance, or has, let's say, the chance to lead to a breach among ASEAN's members. Can countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore have enough power to persuade other Southeast Asian countries or other countries in the area, let's say, also go to South Asian countries? Or what actions could they take individually to interfere in the conflict?
I believe, again, just to recap, again, this goes back to the dilemma of the member states on, how much interference they should, how much action they can take not to breach that non-interference agreement. But I think what we could reflect on is the past success in April during the ASEAN summit, where they reached the 5-point consensus. This also links to the meeting between Indonesia's foreign minister with Russian's foreign minister, that they had a conversation, and then they thought that the starting point of a resolution could start from the 5-point consensus that was agreed previously by ASEAN during last April. And I should also mention, like, one of the initial success of the resolution approach one was also Indonesia's initiative to hold that emergency summit, the special ASEAN summit, where this also involves Myanmar's coup leader. But this was also noted as a quite fruitful result and summit, given Brunei's very pragmatic approach to this conflict. So I think that's also like a start point that countries could start from when coming to assisting a resolution for Myanmar.
Thanks again, Medina. Also, I wanted to, before we move on to another topic, I wanted to ask one more thing to you, Medina, about the 5-point consensus. When is it going to to take place, especially for given the disparity between some of the members of ASEAN?
So the 5-point consensus was actually reached last April. I believe it's April 24th. But what the progress that we've seen so far is that from Myanmar's part, they're not very much complying to the agreed 5-point consensus from the ASEAN summit back in April.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Also, if I can
Sure.
also touch on the 5-point consensus from Myanmar's perspective, no? Because I think the way that it has been packaged or discussed in the media is is not reflective of what has been happening on the ground for us here since April. For ASEAN leaders, they claim that the 5-point consensus was a great success. For many of us here, especially the people, we were quite insulted by that assessment, given the fact that Met Online was invited to the meeting. Whether or not it was intentional, it was almost a branch of legitimacy to his rule, to the military government, and wanting to interact with them and wanting to negotiate with them. Furthermore, the military then used that leadership summit as an opportunity to push that narrative. The world recognizes Met Online as your supreme leader. You should follow suit. It was used as propaganda within our news channels and news media. I should clarify that when I open the television, I have no access to BBC or CNN or any international news channels now.
I think we are having some problems with Ted's connection.
I think that has been cut off.
Oh.
I don't know, like I can't hear her anymore. And
sorry,
her image is
I
stuck.
apologize.
Now she's back.
I'm back. So as I was saying,
Go.
So that is, they use ASEAN as a tool in and of themselves to push the narrative that they are a legitimate power, that they are the legitimate government. For us, that is a great insult. The 5-point consensus is also very rudimentary. And as Medina has pointed out, the Myanmar junta has not followed that 5-point consensus at all. When I think of how long it has taken since then, we are now in July. That meeting was in April, and I understand that from institutional point of view, we are always told things take time, but we have waited for so long, and so many people have died since April. Even the day of the ASEAN summit meeting, several people were gunned down and killed here in Myanmar during protests. And so, as much as the language around the ASEAN summit is, it was a successful meeting, we got somewhere, we came to a consensus. For us, it feels like it was a lot of for show. And many of us still feel very forgotten here, like our crisis has been forgotten, especially by our regional partner of ASEAN. There is a lot of trust and that has been lost in the people, civilians of Myanmar in regards to ASEAN. When you think of protests early on, we always had signs for ASEAN. We said, please help us, UN. Like we wrote our signs in English, hoping that more people would pay attention to us. But now it is not the same anymore. We have, and I think that is in due in part because of the non-interference policy that the ASEAN leaders insist on following. And we are experiencing the collateral damage of that. So I do want to make that point from our perspective as well.
Thank you, Ted. So another point that I would also like to raise are those that of the international companies that are some of them are still in Myanmar, some are already deciding to pull out of the country due to volatility, sanctions. They can fear sanctions from the international community and threats made to the company's employees. So there are many. The latest event was the Telenor some 10 days ago decided to sell the Myanmar branch and sell the company on its entirety and leave the country because it was under threats of the junta to install spyware on the mobile phones of the Burmese citizens. However, since the company was not willing to enforce this law, it decided to leave the country and sell the company. The problem, however, is they sold it to another telecommunications group, the M1 group from Lebanon, and it's been proven that this company has links with the military through other businesses. So the thing is, some companies, yes, are deciding to leave the country because of the volatility of the country's economy, because of sanctions, because they can also fear sanctions. They can their businesses can be their business actions in other countries can be backfired, can backfire due to their presence in Myanmar. However, it is also important to see what the aftermath of it is. So, for example, for Telenor to leave the country was a good idea. To sell it to M1 Group was not a good idea, as it furthers support to the military by other actors. There's also other companies. There's a plethora of companies in Myanmar, from international companies, I mean, from the telecommunications sector, but also the energy manufacture and many others. In the energy sector, something similar happens. So companies like Total and Chevron had a gas joint venture in territorial waters in Myanmar. Sorry. And recently they decided to suspend payments to the junta for that gas joint venture. However, some of the companies such as Total, Chevron, or even Heineken, the beer company, the Dutch beer company, argues that if they stop payments, they suspend payments to the junta, or they stop forwarding the income tax to the junta, it is going to maybe affect them in the long term, as the junta could they could have legal repercussions with the junta. So it is let's say, a counter argument a lot of companies are making. Yes, we are trying to not pay the military, or we have no direct links to the military, but if we do, we risk having legal repercussions, or having our employees threatened by the military. Another case comes from the manufacturing sector with H&M and Primark, both European companies. They froze the assets. I think early on during the conflict. However, I think it was last month, they decided to resume operations again in the country. And again, international companies, even though they are international big corporations such as H&M, Total, Chevron, Primark, they are met with the same dilemma. They leave, or they decide to suspend payments to the junta. However, it's a company after all, let's say, so their main objective is sadly making money. So that's why, for example, H&M and Primark, they are phrasing let's say their return to Myanmar as saying, if we're not here, companies and plants will have to close. A lot of millions of workers are going to be with no jobs. No jobs means no money, and yet again, it's another crisis for the country. These are the excuses that they are making. It's not an easy situation, let's say. However, most of them are still preferring putting money first rather than sanctions, or rather than human rights violations in the country. And but sadly, the thing is, even though those companies have big stakes in the country, and European countries, the US and other Western countries are imposing sanctions on specific people in Myanmar, especially related to the junta. The problem is, they are not, they could make a dent to the economy, but the problem is China was and still is the main trade partner for Myanmar. So unless China doesn't make anything to counter this, to counter the coup, there's not much, in comparison that other companies in other countries can do. I don't know if you, Ted, want to add anything. I saw you were nodding.
Yes, I think part of the civilian movement has also been monitoring what businesses have ties with the military junta, which ones don't, and many of the businesses who have ties with the military are on what is known as a collective boycott list. Businesses that we have chosen not to interact with. And when it comes to the Telenor case, it does concern me from the perspective of we have to consider, in terms of what the future of Myanmar is going to look like, what stakeholders can we leverage, which ones can we not leverage? And when a company such as Telenor, who has, since its inception, its entrance into Myanmar, has always come from the perspective of, we will adhere to international standards, we will adhere to the upholding human rights in Myanmar, and even under difficult circumstances, they were quite transparent with us when we went through complete internet shutdowns in Myanmar very early on. They were very transparent about when it had to happen, why they were being ordered to do it, unlike the other phone service companies now. So it deeply saddens me, not necessarily that they exited, but that they have sold their company to the M1 company in the way that they have. Because I think those types of business decisions ultimately jeopardize us civilians more than it helps us stabilize now. And so I think that's the message I would want to send to any foreign investors who are still debating whether to continue operating in Myanmar. Is the work that you are doing going to further jeopardize the livelihood and well-being of the civilians that you are trying to market yourselves towards? Or is it that you can leverage the social and monetary capital that you have in order to assist us now? So I think that would be my thought process on that, which is why there's an independent group of activists called Justice for Myanmar that have very well done data and what is known as the junta cartel finance map. It shows all of the different companies and different businesses that are interconnected with the coup, not just by 1 degree, but maybe by 5 degrees of separation. You may not be knowing it, but you buying this T-shirt is help supporting the military junta now. So how can we stay informed? And these are the types of work that we are trying to do. And I think it is that type of work that will help us keep informed in the future in terms of where we will go from here. So.
Thank you, Ted. Is there anything that you wanted to add, Medina?
Yeah, just quickly about the sanctions. So, political sanctions does play a significant impact. Like, for example, with the UK, on June 21st, they have recently released, the UK 6th tranche of Myanmar sanction, which includes the suspension on trade promotion in Myanmar and placing sanctions to organization that has a direct link to Myanmar's junta. So this extends to the requirement for organizations or companies or multinationals to actually undergo tight due diligence process just to ensure that their supply chain are not in any way linked or trading or in business that benefits the junta, and that's how significant this sanction could extend.
Yes, exactly. There's been many tranches of sanctions imposed to the military junta in Myanmar, but again, it is always welcome. The problem is again that proportionately they're not they do not make that much impact. But as I said before, they're always welcome. It also is like the grain of it makes there's a difference there when you see that those countries are also making sanctions, even though the economic matters are mixed in between. So one last question for both of you. Is there any way that listeners could in any way participate or help the movement against the military junta in Myanmar?
Medina, would you like to go first?
Yeah, whoever wants to.
Sure. I think from, at least from my perspective, is that we see a case of misinformation because we do not see what is really going on in Myanmar, and there's a wide information gap here, and I think one way we could push this further is to be very much more critical and resourceful when it comes to finding resources and reading materials around recent events, especially in Myanmar, because obviously it's not. There's this, again, as I mentioned, there's this information gap that we need to try to minimize, and I believe one of the ways is just, for example, just sharing via this webinar itself has been very much, a very much significant movement or activity to help minimize that. So at least that's the very least I think that the rest of us could do.
I think there's a lot you can do, and it depends on the type of position that you have in the world and what your capacity is. So let me, tailor my answers in two ways. From a policy perspective, I think, we have been inundated with thoughts and prayers and statements of concerns and condemnation against the military. Unfortunately, words did not protect my loved ones from the military. Those statements did nothing for them in the end. So I think the international world in particular needs to very much re-examine the tools and mechanisms they have in place in regards to fighting against authoritarianism. It can feel like we are of no consequence because we are so far away from the day-to-day lived experiences of the other outside world, even with our neighbors. Someone in Thailand and Bangkok might have no idea what is happening in Myanmar, as Medina has touched on, because of the lack of information. But authoritarianism anywhere is going to be a threat on a global scale. And even if you think about this from a pandemic perspective, we are currently going through a Delta variant. If Myanmar cannot take control of the pandemic, it is going to spread to our regional partners. Our regional partners will then spread it to the rest of the globe. And what you saw in 2020 will repeat itself again. I think there's a need for more urgent global urgency of people needing to take global responsibility for these crises and these issues now. And there needs to be this conversation of we need to update the tools and mechanisms we have for intervention, because sanctions can be effective if done in a proper way. Even with the lawyer Ben Menashe, who was hired by the military to represent him, because of the sanctions against him by the Canadian and the US government, he dropped the case because the payments could not go through to his account. Those are, for us, he should have never taken the case in the first place. On the other side, we are glad that the sanctions were effective in that manner. These things can help us, but these tools need to be updated. And I don't think on an international level, we have had that conversation of what do we do when we are staring a crisis in the face, when millions and millions of people are screaming for help, but we have no mechanism to help them that doesn't interfere with these very archaic methods and framing of how we handle global crises now. So that's from the policy perspective. From a civilian perspective, staying informed about what is happening in Myanmar, is very easy. We are in the digital world. Take advantage of the digital landscape that we have: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So many civilian journalists are online right now, speaking their truth about what is happening in Myanmar. That is part of how Marta found me, I'm sure, is because of my online activity. We will share what is happening. You yourself can translate it, share it with your own groups as well. We have many, many allies within the Milk Tea Alliance, within Southeast Asia, but also, in Italy, in England, and France. So many of the civilians are helping. So many Burmese diaspora who are in those countries are also helping get our truth out there. Hear them as well. amplify their voices. And then when it comes to your leaders, tell them what is happening, and please express to them that, I am just one person, and I cannot force you to care about me, cannot force you to care about my country, but I hope that in listening to this webinar, you are, moved a little bit to learn some more and help us, and maybe talk to your political leaders about doing something more for us. I cannot survive on your statements, but I can survive if you help us. Even if that means sending humanitarian aid for us here. We are running out of food. We are running out of money. The banks are running out of cash. We are very much in critical crisis mode, and we have been operating on survival mode for the past couple of months. So we need your help, and even as a civilian, you can help us immediately. If that means you can donate to the many channels of donations that can help sustain our movement, whether that's helping us buy oxygen tanks so our people can breathe, whether that is also supporting all of the civil servants who chose to not work for the military and are now in desperate need of income to support their families. They need that help because of them, we can sustain the movement. It is because of them the military feels desperate now, no? So there are ways that you can support us, or if that means donating so that the 900 people have been killed, 5,000 are in jail. Over 300,000 people have lost their homes and are now running for their lives inside of Myanmar. They're internally displaced, and they also need medicine, water, food. There are many donation channels that you can donate to help sustain us now. So these are very tangible things. €1 can buy a whole meal for us for one day. No, that's the way the currency is operating right now, is how bad the currency issue has happened. €1 can help save a person's life. That is what you as civilians can do for us. And so those, I think, are some tangible ways that you can help us to survive, if not even to sustain the movement, but just to live.
Okay.
We need to live. Yeah.
Okay. So sincerely, thank you very much, Ted, for your words. In these last words that you have said, at least me as a businessman, as a person, as someone that has done in the past political activity, I can feel your the desperation that you really put your heart, and you are seriously pushing your heart behind and beyond the obstacle. So seriously, thank you. As a business, as Prelia as a business, it's a political risk outfit. So we are analyzing what's happening in Myanmar from a business point of view. But I believe I am speaking with for both Medina and for Marta as a professionals and as also person. We are near you, and we can do all the possible things that you have asked us in our private life to try to help you in whatever way is possible. But sincerely, thank you very much for speaking, both from a professional point of view, trying to explain us how the ethnic politics is playing in your country. But in the end, I understood that you have been taken up by your emotions, and it's fine, it's perfect, and I understand where you're coming from. Thank you also to Medina for intervening and speaking not about Myanmar, but about the regional context in which Myanmar is. And we can't forget that Myanmar is not like a single island. It's immersed into a region, it's immersed into a context, and we have to take care of it. Thank you very much, Marta, for managing perfectly this webinar, and for preparing questions, and for engaging well with our guests. One guest is your colleague. And I would like to highlight one stuff, before we have discussed, maybe Ted has mentioned about gender equality. I am really proud that in this webinar, there are 3 women, 1 man, and all the person in this webinar are young people under 30 years old. Me, I am maybe the older one. As you can notice, I am 27. You are maybe slightly older than 20 years old. So I am really proud that we have 3 women discussing about politics, discussing about international relations, and discussing about very serious issue. And I wanted to mention also that today there had to be also Carlos Sardinia Galace, which sadly has some kind of side effects of the vaccine. Whatever, we encourage everyone which is watching this webinar to take the vaccine to protect himself, herself, and the person that he or she loves. So Carlos Sardinia Galace, like I'm giving you a little bio of him, is a Spanish journalist that worked in Myanmar since 2010 during the country's transition to democracy. He is the author of the Burmese Labyrinth, a book that recounts Myanmar's complex history and the origins of the Rohingya ethnic cleansing. His work has been published in Al Jazeera, the South China Morning Post, and Nikkei Asia Review. So Carlos, I hope that you will be better in the next days, and thank you very much for accepting being here in this webinar. Sadly, you couldn't because you are a bit sick. So this was the first webinar organized by Prelia. I hope that we have done a great job in doing it. And thank you again to Marta and to the people that engaged and intervened, Tet and Medina Ramaputri. Thank you very much, guys, for watching this webinar. And we will do more webinars in the future about any other possible geopolitical and political arguments that may arise. Thank you very much.
Thank you.